Tonight on Bridge City News, police and fire officials continue their investigation into a fatal house fire over the weekend. The mercury will be climbing as Environment Canada issues a heat warning for our region. And a Christian group is making a big difference in the lives of migrants along the U.S.-Mexico border. We have the details.
Your province. Your southern Alberta. You're from the heart of Lethbridge. It's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. We begin this evening with some startling information from Statistics Canada. According to the government's agency's latest crime index, Lethbridge is now number 1. Following closely behind our city is Regina, Winnipeg, Saskatoon, and then Edmonton rounding out the top 5. All 5 being Western Canadian cities. The report says there were more than 2 million incidents of crime reported to police across Canada over the past year. That was a 2% increase from 2017. Now, when it came to homicides, however, Ontario led the way with 69 more deaths than Alberta or British Columbia. As for fraud, including identity theft, Stats Canada says it increased 12% between 2017 and 2018, marking a 46% increase over the rate reported in 2008. Lethbridge Police and Fire Department are continuing their investigation into a fatal house fire over the weekend. Firefighters say the blaze broke out in the basement suite of a home located in the 600 block of 5th Street South. A 50-year-old man and a dog died. Damage to the property was estimated at around $200,000. The investigation into what caused the fire is still ongoing. As the farming session is in full swing, Lethbridge County would like to remind producers of the importance of proper irrigation practices. One dangerous and costly method is creating some safety concerns.
We basically wanted to bring this up again because a lot of people are having their end guns run on the roads again, and they're putting water and splashing water down on the road. So when an end gun hits something, it hits with quite a bit of force. So it does have a tendency to damage the road and move the gravel around on it, also creating a very large wet spots on the road. So if you're traveling down the road, for instance, at 80 kilometers an hour and it's night or dark or something, and you come upon one of those spots, you could be in for a dangerous ride.
The county's community peace officers will enforce this bylaw to ensure the safety of road users and protection of county infrastructure. In some cases, the landowner may also be charged for the cost of repairing the road, in addition to a fine of up to $3,000. Government of Alberta workers who are union members plan to protest Bill 9 this Wednesday outside of the provincial building in Lethbridge. Bill 9 will delay wage arbitration in the public sector until after October 31st, and this will affect many provincial workers, including members of the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees. We spoke with AUPE Vice President Susan Slade about the issue.
This is a contract, right? The government is breaking the contract that was, decided on by both parties, the government of the day as well as AUPE. The members voted on that. They agreed to it. Everything was signed, sealed, and delivered. And then once the UCP were elected, they decided that they weren't going to honor that portion of the contract, which would be the wage reopener. So that's why members are upset. With the Government of Alberta employees, we were actively in arbitration when this bill came down, so that stalled. And we were about maybe 1 to 2 days away from the arbitrator being able to start writing her decision.
The information picket will be held this Wednesday, July 24th, 12 noon in front of the provincial building. A second picket will be held on August 19th in front of St. Michael's Health Centre. It seems like everyone on social media is talking about a new challenge that makes you look older or younger. It's called the Age Challenge, and you can try using a smartphone app called FaceApp. However, controversy surrounding the craze has surfaced when it was discovered in the app's terms of service that the developer can use your image any way they want. Sharon Polsky is a privacy and data protection advisor, and she says this is no different than uploading your photos to Facebook.
The situation with my app is very much the same as with Facebook and almost any other social media or app that you use, because the terms of service and what they refer to as a privacy policy, which is really just a statement of how they're going to use your information, they all pretty much say pretty much the same thing. It gives a wonderful feeling that the company is going to take great care of your information and protect it and safeguard it. And the first line usually is, "We respect your privacy." That puts fear into my heart, because if you read a little farther down, although they respect your privacy, how they define it is you're giving them a license to do essentially whatever they want. And And you don't have an option to say, yes, you may do this, but you may not do that. It's an all or nothing sort of bargain.
Polsky warns users of apps and social media platforms to be vigilant to not trade their photos or personal information with untrusted third parties. A recent study out says exercise dramatically lowers your risk of getting cancer. Dr. Clayton Cogano, who specializes in exercise science kinesiology and is doing 3 years of research on radiation and cancer, has more.
The study showed that patients, women, it was a study on women in breast cancer, women that had exercised and stopped exercising when they got diagnosed had a 50% increased risk of death.
Wow.
Those that started exercising that hadn't had a 50% increased survival rate. So what we know is that exercise is very beneficial in cancer.
Dr. Cogano will also discuss which foods and supplements help fight cancer. Watch for that coming up in the second half of our show. There's a man who fought his way back from alcoholism and is willing to share his story of hope. Norman Saunders says he spent most of his life dependent on booze and drugs and finally decided to seek help in the darkness of addiction. BCN's Loris Alexander shares his story to sobriety.
Let's try this again. I guess my first time I ever thought I became addicted was when I was around 15. I grew up with not a great childhood, a lot of violence through school and at home.
Norman's childhood set the stage for his alcohol addiction, and that dependency turned into a coping mechanism.
It made an appearance every time something went bad, where I lost a job or lost a relationship.
Alcohol gave Norman a sense of false security.
It was just what I saw. It was, I guess, a learned behavior. I thought that, being around alcohol was something that I had to do in order to have fun, to have friends, to be involved with my work and things like that. And then it's totally false.
Then tragedy struck, and that was a wake-up call for Norman.
A friend of mine OD'd in front of me. I tried to save that person, and that person didn't come back.
Norman says his sobriety called for a complete change in lifestyle, and that's when he sought help with Streets Alive.
I had to change my old habits, my old patterns and behaviors, and it's not just overnight it's going to happen. It's through constant repetition, but hanging around with people that are doing it, living life sober and clean, that's what I found is the big turning point in my life.
Norman credits Streets Alive and God for revolutionizing his life.
God has always been there. It's me. My will blocked him out. My will said, no, I don't need your help. I don't need the help of somebody else here at Streets. And when I had to give up, total surrender, and ask for help, great things have happened.
Norm is now almost 18 months sober and says the key to his recovery is 1 Corinthians 16:13. Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, and be strong. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
The Transportation Safety Board is investigating following a fatal airplane crash near Jasper. RCMP say the plane was taking off from an airstrip near Jasper when it crashed into a nearby river. A spokesperson with Alberta Health Services says the passenger died and the pilot is recovering in hospital. Heat warnings have been issued across the prairies. Environment Canada says the mercury should be climbing to 30 degrees or higher over the next few days. The agency says it's thanks to a ridge of high pressure that's been building over Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba.
The best way, obviously, is to stay indoors during the really hot times, which is usually the noon hour. And that's kind of, or sort of the noon-ish hour. And obviously to keep watch over our most vulnerable, which would be the people at the extremes of age who can't really tell us about symptoms, which would be our babies and our seniors. Drinking a lot of water. Fans aren't really helpful unless you're moist. So if you're going to have a fan, make sure you also have some water that you put on your skin or on your face. So if you use a fan, that actually cools you down.
News of another heat wave is not good news for firefighters who've been battling the Chuckegg Creek wildfire in northern Alberta, which at one point was over 300,000 hectares in size. Fortunately, the blaze is now over 60% contained. Meanwhile, in southern Ontario, locals there have to deal with temperatures in the mid-30s, but with the humidex over 40 degrees. Environment Canada says heat warnings were issued for many parts of Ontario, southern Quebec, and the Maritimes. Fortunately, a reprieve could be coming in the next few days. Toronto Police Chaplain Wendell Gibbs led a ceremony earlier today commemorating victims of last year's Danforth shooting. The rampage left 2 dead and 13 injured a year ago.
Today we stand and we sit side by side to symbolize the solidarity we have experienced. Together with so many people around this city, the GTA, and throughout the province and our country, and may I add, and our world at large, that shares in our grief. Should I say our continued grief? We will remember the victims and think of all those who live with the memories of that night. Such a violent act, though, pales against the strength, the spirit, and the community that has been displayed since then, since now, and since always will be, not just at Danforth, but across our city, across our province, and across our nation.
The latest figures on crime across Canada reveal that the number of hate crimes fell by 13% in 2018. That was after a 47% increase the previous year. Stats Canada says even with the decline and factoring out 2017, the number of hate crimes remains higher than any other year since 2009. That follows an upward trend that began in 2014. The RCMP wants to hear from anyone who may have seen a couple of men missing from Surrey, British Columbia. The search for 38-year-old Ryan Provencher and 37-year-old Richard Skur has prompted by the discovery of their empty SUV near Kamloops. The two were last seen Wednesday in the Vancouver area, and investigators say it is not like either of them to be out of contact for so long. A wildfire south of the border near Flagstaff, Arizona has been growing. Officials say the fire has grown to about 1.6 square kilometers. Forest Service officials say the fire was reported about 11 a.m. yesterday by lookouts and from locals. Emergency management officials have issued an evacuation notice for campgrounds around the area. The governor says a Red Cross shelter has been opened at a school in Flagstaff to accommodate those who may need to evacuate. Authorities say a lightning strike at a Gulf Coast beach in Florida injured 8 people, one of them critically. Witnesses described what they saw.
I saw the lightning strike right by the volleyball court, and all of a sudden I heard people saying that people got hit by the lightning. She just jumped right in and started doing the compressions on the guy and like rotating with other people. The adrenaline was rushing, and everybody in the staff, everybody, it was basically like time stopped at that moment. I hope he was going to make it. His girlfriend was like right next to him on the floor, and she was completely traumatized, so I was just hoping he would make it.
I was crying because I was scared, and it's like, it's my first time being here and my first time being to a beach, and for like this to happen, it like really scared me.
Gene editing has been a controversial practice for quite some time. On one hand, it prevents future diseases, but on the other hand, many argue it can be quite unethical. Dr. Anjanette Roberts is a molecular biologist, and she explains what the future of gene editing may look like.
I think that there will be some really fantastic applications in this, even in the course of treating human disease. But I don't think that as a society or as a global society, that we should be monkeying around with the germline, not for a long time to come, not until we can actually decide which diseases are worth the risk, and we can minimize the risks to the point where we know we're only hitting the targets that we want.
Catch the full interview with Dr. Roberts discussing the dangers of gene editing coming up after business news. Migrants along the U.S.-Mexico border are receiving relief in the form of food, water, shelter, and the hope of the gospel, thanks to the folks with Samaritan's Purse.
Samaritan's Purse is here in Brownsville, Texas, at one of the shelters that's a transit center for migrants as they continue on to their final destination. Many of them are scared, many of them are running from terror, many of them are running from gangs, many of them are running from the cartels. Samaritan's Purse has come alongside local partners that are offering them hope, that are offering them safe haven.
Samaritan's Purse is really doing a fabulous job to help us help them, to make them feel welcome, to give them clean clothes, warm food. You guys are serving the people that need it most.
We just want to be the hands and feet of Jesus here on the southern border. We want them to see the love of Christ. We just ask you to continue to pray for us. Continue to pray for protection for our partners and also for the migrants, that as they travel, that they're kept safe. we thank you for your continued prayers and support.
It's wonderful to see. U.S. President Donald Trump says he can win the war in Afghanistan in a week. He says, however, that he does not want to kill millions of people and wipe Afghanistan off the face of the earth. He's trying to persuade Pakistan to get a deal done with the Taliban.
I think Pakistan's going to help us out to extricate ourselves. We're like policemen. We're not fighting a war. If we wanted to fight a war in Afghanistan and win it, I could win that war in a week. I just don't want to kill 10 million people. Does that make sense to you? I don't want to kill 10 million people. I have plans on Afghanistan that if I wanted to win that war, Afghanistan would be wiped off the face of the earth. It would be gone. It would be over literally in 10 days. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to go that route. So we're working with Pakistan and others to extricate ourselves, nor do we want to be policemen, because basically we're policemen right now. And we're not supposed to be policemen. We've been there for 19 years in Afghanistan. It's ridiculous.
Cell phone video shows a violent clash between pro-democracy demonstrators and a group of masked assailants Sunday in Hong Kong. At least 45 people were injured in the fight. 22 still remain in hospital, including one man in critical condition. Footage showed the attackers beating people with wooden clubs inside of a subway car. Some tried to protect themselves using a water hose and umbrellas. Hundreds of thousands took part in the march on Sunday to call for elections and an investigation into police tactics used during earlier pro-democracy demonstrations. It was on this day that Wiley Post completes the first solo flight around the world. Legendary gunslinger John Dillinger is shot dead, and it's the birth of the Frisbee. This is Today in History for July the 22nd.
July 22nd, 1933. Aviator Wiley Post completes the first solo flight around the world in 7 days, 18 3/4 hours. 1934. Federal agents shoot to death a man identified as John Dillinger outside a movie theater in Chicago. Dillinger had been declared public enemy number 1 for his Midwest bank robberies during the Great Depression. 2003. In Iraq, Saddam Hussein's sons, Odeh and Qusay, are killed in a gun battle with U.S. troops in the northern city of Mosul. That happens a few months after an American-led invasion topples Saddam's regime from power. Months later, U.S. soldiers capture Saddam. He is hanged in December 2006 after he's convicted of crimes against humanity. 2004. The September 11th Commission's final report details U.S. government failures in preventing the terrorist attacks on New York and Washington. Commission Chair Thomas Kean.
Our failures took place over many years and administrations. There's no single individual who is responsible for our failures.
1822. Gregor Mendel, the Austrian monk whose work shaped modern genetics, is born in what's now the Czech Republic. And 1957. It's up, and away for the Frisbee as Walter Fred Morrison applies for a patent for the plastic flying toy that remains a hit. Today in History, July 22nd. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
Environment Canada has issued a heat warning for our region. How long will it continue? Well, weather details are coming up in just a moment. Environment Canada has issued a heat warning for many parts of southwestern Alberta. Hot and sunny today. Tonight, just a few clouds with a low near 14. A mix of sun and cloud, but hot again tomorrow with the mercury climbing to 34 degrees. Wednesday cooling off slightly to 25. Thursday, a few degrees warmer at 28. Lots of sunshine on Friday with the temperature rising to 31. A nice weekend is shaping up. Sunny and 30 on Saturday. Blue sky and 26 degrees on Sunday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 and an average low of 11. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1938 at 37 degrees, and the record low was 4 in 1984. Sunrise was at 5:48, sunset at 9:27. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up now across our home and native land. It should be mainly sunny and 24 in Victoria, a mixture of sun and cloud and 23 for Vancouver. Sunny and a hot 31 is expected in Calgary on Tuesday. Edmonton had a heat warning today. Tomorrow sunny and a sizzling 31 degrees. Just a few clouds and 31 is also on tap for both Regina and Saskatoon tomorrow. Just a few clouds and 30 for Winnipeg. Toronto, which has also been dealing with a heat wave, should be slightly cooler tomorrow at 26. Ottawa and Montreal will have loads of sunshine and 26 degrees as well. A slight chance of showers and 25 is expected in Fredericton tomorrow. Thunder showers and 21 for Halifax. Rain and 19 for Charlottetown. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect showers and a high of 17 degrees tomorrow. Our country's agriculture ministers say they want officials to propose improvements to the Agri-Stability Business Risk Management Program before the end of the year. The ministers who met in Quebec recently said compensation to supply-managed sectors that are affected by the European and Trans-Pacific trade deals are vital. They also talked about the labor shortage that agribusinesses are currently dealing with despite recent recruitment drives. Ministers also talked about swine fever and the importance of a pan-Canadian action plan to deal with the issue. Equifax will pay up to $700 million to settle with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission over a 2017 data breach that exposed private information of nearly 150 million people. If approved, the settlement will provide up to $425 million of monetary relief to consumers, a $100 million civil money penalty, along with other relief. There were 8,000 Canadians also affected by the breach, one of the largest ever to threaten private information. The Atlanta-based consumer reporting agency says it did not detect the attack for more than 6 weeks. Volvo is recalling around 500,000 cars around the world. The problem is a plastic engine component that could melt and cause a vehicle to catch on fire. Volvo says the affected cars have 2-liter, 4-cylinder engines built between 2014 and 2019, which can be found in most Volvo models. So far, there are no reports of any injuries or accidents linked to the fault. The 2020 Chevrolet Corvette was unveiled, and it is radically different from its predecessors. With this Vette, you'll find the engine in the middle of the car.
Yeah, so this is the 2020 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. We're introducing it July 18th. Goal is to be on sale by the end of the calendar year. The 7th generation came out as in 2013 as a 2014 model. We're in our 6th model year, so this is our 8th Corvette generation. Well, the big thing that sets us apart is our new configuration. It's a mid-engine configuration with the engine behind the driver. And it really enables a whole new proportion for the car, new look for the car, a new type of driving experience.
We might not see the Corvette outsell the current generation. What's more important for the Corvette is that it does accurately demonstrate sort of this high level of technology, the high level of performance, and it's where GM can express and show what it can do in that level. As much as we buy cars to get ourselves from A to B, to move our families to where we need to go, and to just move around, you know, part of it's romance and excitement and passion and fun, and vehicles like the Corvette embody that.
The older crowd, they have the 63 split window, you know, and there's the later generations. But this is really for a new generation of customers. This is going to be a big change for the Corvette while still keeping true to the Corvette values.
That is a sweet-looking ride. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge Police and Fire Department are continuing their investigation into a fatal house fire over the weekend. Firefighters say the blaze broke out in the basement suite of a house located in the 600 block of 5th Street South. A 50-year-old man and a dog died. Damage to the property was estimated around $200,000. The investigation into the cause of the fire is still ongoing. Gene editing, is it a good thing? Is it ethical? Up next, we hear from a molecular biologist who shares her concerns. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Green and Yellow Group is hosting the 3rd annual Chili Cook-Off July 26th to the 28th at 2006 58th Street South in Lethbridge. This year, funds raised will go to support the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories. This action-packed event includes delicious chili and ribs, live music, games, face painting, and more. Plus, enjoy a pancake breakfast Saturday morning for only $2. Tickets are $22 per person and children 6 and under are free. For more information, call 403-795-4920. Devil's Coulee Dinosaur and Heritage Museum, located in Warner, Alberta, is now open until September 2nd. Take a tour of the Dinosaur Gallery, heritage exhibits, and military displays. Visit Charlie the Baby Dinosaur and see an actual nesting site. For more information, visit devilcoulee.com. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or email Lethbridge Legal Guidance at telus.net. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
A Russian scientist is hoping to edit human genes in order to prevent the HIV virus or genetic deafness from being passed on to children. Scientists, however, consider this to be a little unethical. Joining me now to discuss this from Covina, California, a little bit further, is molecular biologist Dr. Anjanette Roberts, a research scholar with reasons to believe. Anjanette, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you, Hal. Good to be here.
Now, can you explain what is involved with this new gene editing technique?
So this new technique has been around since about 2013. It was discovered in 2012. And it's actually a set of molecular tools that allows us to target the genome in a particular sequence. So if we know the sequence of something's DNA, we can look for a particular sequence and we can create the tools to target that sequence and change that sequence in a way that can introduce a function or restore a function.
So before we delve in a little deeper to this Russian scientist, Denis Rebrakov, and this proposal, I wonder if we can travel back a little bit in time here, because this comes after a Chinese scientist last year claimed to have created twins from edited embryos. Did we ever find out if he was in fact successful?
Well, I think the international scientific community believes that he actually did what he said he did. And so he has twin girls that have had a protein that's used for HIV to enter cells edited in their genome, and he did it when they were a zygote or a very small portion of an embryo, and so he was able to target all of their cells. So there's a lot of reasons why he probably hasn't made them resistant to HIV, and perhaps he's created other problems for them down the line by altering this protein, but that was his intent, and we believe he was successful in what he said he did, and he actually claims to have altered a third embryo as well, who is probably born at this point in time, because the time that he announced it, the time that it takes for full-term delivery, we're just now reaching 42 weeks after that announcement. So there's probably 3 individuals in China that are bearing a mutation in their entire body that was changed due to this man's intervention.
Okay, let's go back and chat a bit about the Russian biologist, Denis Rebrakov. Give me a little bit of background story on the scientist, and why does he feel justified in editing human genes?
Right, so it seems to me that Denis Rebrakov works for the Kulikov Medical Research Center in Moscow, and he, like the other gentlemen in China, work in an in vitro fertilization clinic type setting at least part of the time. And so he comes in contact with women who are trying to have children, but he also feels like we ought to be using this technology to prevent disease, either like HIV, or in his case, he also wants to target a protein that leads to deafness if both parents are deaf. It's a particular protein that both copies in their chromosomes have to have the mutation. So it's called autosomal recessive. If it's recessive, you have to have alterations in both copies of your chromosomes. The father's deaf, the mother's deaf, that means all the chromosomes have that mutation. So if they're going to reproduce, they will 100% of the time have a child with hearing impediment. And so he wants to try and target that gene so that those couples can have hearing children.
Now, this may sound a little bit harsh here, Anjanette, but is this actually a compelling need to have children who hear? Because deafness is not really a life-threatening disorder.
That's absolutely right. Deafness is not a life-threatening threatening disease. And so it's not even a disease for many people. There is a deaf culture that is very rich and vibrant, at least here in the United States. It's possibly different in Russia, but yes, it's definitely not a life-threatening impediment. And so to target something like that, really, there isn't a driving, compelling necessity to try and help change that so that those children can have quality of life.
Now, if the experiment, in fact, does work, then, of course, you'll have some happy couples who have children who can hear. Now, some would see this as a major victory. How do you see it?
Well, I think it's a complex situation. The couple can't reproduce naturally. They actually have to use the in vitro fertilization route. And so that means they're going to be creating embryos, and only some of those embryos will probably be implanted, so it raises that issue. Many people who are deaf, who have hearing children naturally, they realize that there's a cultural difference that takes place between the parents and the children. And so it can create tensions in the home that aren't exactly what the parents might have desired if they knew how it was going to play out. I mean, certainly some parents would be very happy to have a hearing child. Some deaf parents would prefer to have a deaf child. So it really is an individual choice at that point. I think the biggest complex issue here is that to make these kinds of changes at a germline level absolutely necessitates that somebody go through the in vitro fertilization process. And so we're not talking about natural births.
Now, is it true that changes to an embryo would be inherited by future generations? Let's say an unintended mutation affected the entire gene pool.
That's right. It could very well affect all subsequent descendants of the individuals who have this type of alteration done to them, right? So the zygote in the in vitro fertilization process, if it reaches full term, if child's born, if the child's healthy and they reach reproductive age, all of their offspring and all of their offspring's offspring will have that edit also in their genomes.
Now, one of the ethical issues, of course, is if the unborn embryos, did not and could not consent to this. So if something were to go very wrong, it would affect real people's lives. Your thoughts on that?
It absolutely would affect real people's lives. And that's one of the reasons why the majority of the international scientific community is calling for a moratorium on this type of research, because the technique, although it can target a very specific site, we don't know that it's only targeting that site. And especially when you're talking about something that's in the embryonic formative stage of the zygote, if you use sort of a laboratory representation of that type of a cell and you try and make these types of changes using this gene editing tool in those types of cells, what you find is in those cells you have more what they call off-target hits. So you may be correcting the gene that you want to correct, but you're also hitting other targets that aren't intended. And so that's really risky, especially when you're talking about doing that in an embryo at the zygotic state.
So what do you say to ethicists who believe that if gene editing is one day shown to be safe, there would then be a moral imperative to use it to prevent conditions such as deafness?
Yes, I don't think that there will ever be. Well, I guess we help set what moral standards are, ethical standards are for our society, but I don't think there should ever be a moral imperative that says that parents must undergo in vitro fertilization if they want to have children, and if the only way they can have children through natural processes results in a child that might have an impediment like the deafness mutation that Dr. Rubrikoff wants to target, then I would say that there's no way we should, as a society, should ever accept that type of language, that there should be that type of moral imperative.
So, Anjanette, if gene editing proves to be safe down the road, should we really be concerned that this could lead to some nations attempting to create designer babies? I'm thinking of more Captain Americas. Remember that movie?
Yes, absolutely. I actually enjoyed that movie. But, it's an interesting concept. We have to learn a lot more before we'll ever be able to fully affect complex behaviors at an adult level by doing this type of intervention. It's much more likely that we'll target diseases that are really life-threatening and that are simple to target because they're related to only one gene. So many blood disorders or things like Tay-Sachs. It might be worth targeting HIV, but we'd have to target at least 2 different proteins. And what we're learning by this scientist's work in China is that the edits that he's made might have unforeseen consequences. They might protect from HIV, but they might make the children more susceptible to other virus diseases. Because like many proteins in our bodies, they don't just have a single function. They have multiple functions. And the target for the deafness gene that the doctor in Russia wants to manipulate actually has 6 different names in the literature. And if we mess around with that protein, it's also associated with skin disorders. The protein's also found in neurological tissue. And so we don't know when CRISPR goes in and targets, even if it's targeting the right target and only that target, what it's doing is it's causing a couple of nicks in the DNA, and those nicks have to be repaired. And they're repaired through normal cellular processes, but those processes are also imprecise. So even in the process of making repair and making the change that you want to make, you can introduce other changes that you don't intend to introduce.
How about eliminating maybe a cancer gene or maybe heart disease, which is also very prominent here in North America?
Absolutely. And I think that those would make more sense. But again, heart disease is often linked to lifestyle. And so if we just made the right lifestyle choices, we wouldn't be as susceptible to those diseases.
But cancer, that's a big one too. And there's so many forms of cancer. Leukemia, breast cancer, prostate cancer, brain cancer, skin cancer, the list goes on, right?
So those diseases might be able to be effectively targeted by not targeting germline, but by targeting what's called somatic cells, adult cells. Wait until the person's born, wait until the disease is either detected, or wait until the genes that lead to the disease are detected, and then intervene at an adult stage, and then you're not affecting subsequent generations without unforeseen consequences.
So what are your thoughts on where this is really headed? Where will we be 10 years from now when it comes to DNA editing?
Yeah, so 10 years from now, I think we'll be using this tool in some really smart ways in agriculture and nature, I hope. I hope we use it with a modicum of humility, though, and we don't just create gene drives where we're wiping out entire species. But I think that there will be some really fantastic applications in this, even in the course of treating human disease. But I don't think that as a society or as a global society, that we should be monkeying around with the germline, not for a long time to come, not until we can actually decide which diseases are worth the risk, and we can minimize the risks to the point where we know we're only hitting the targets that we want.
Now you mentioned monkeying around. How about our pets? Maybe helping out our dogs, cats, and monkeys?
Yes, I suppose the wealthy will be able to take those approaches.
Dr. Anjanette Roberts, molecular biologist with Reasons to Believe. Thanks for joining me today from Covina, California.
Thank you, Hal.
Joining me in studio is Dr. Clayton Coggino. He's a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Meridian Integrated Health and Wellness Center. He's also done some training in conventional medicine and has a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science Kinesiology and doing 3 years of research on radiation and cancer at the University of Lethbridge. Welcome back to BCN.
Thanks for having me.
So Dr. Coggino, let's talk about how you really deal and handle patients who have cancer.
Yeah.
There must be a lot of compassion involved, isn't there?
Yeah, you have to. It's a very complex time for patients and their families. You have to treat it with care. There's a lot of confusion that's going on. Patients need advice and they need time to sit down with me and also their oncologist. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to take the time to answer a lot of the questions that they have, because they do have a lot of questions.
I have friends who dealt with prostate cancer, and the urologist they had, the specialist, said, "Oh, just go with it. You know, you 80% chance you got prostate cancer. Just go deal with it." No bedside manner,
right.
And that's difficult. Some people say, "Well, that's good because you know where this guy's coming from. He's a straight shooter." But on the other hand, there has to be a little more compassion, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I love doing naturopathic medicine and especially treating cancer, because I have a lot of time to sit down with patients. And a lot of times it takes a little bit for them to warm up to asking questions. Sometimes they come in with lists of questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them because it's a scary time and you want to have proper direction.
Now, you deal with both conventional and natural methods. Are they both safe when it comes to chemo and radiation?
No. There is contraindications. You have to be careful when you're dealing with natural therapies because they are powerful and they are strong, and they can contraindicate with conventional therapies like chemotherapy, radiation, and even surgery. So it's best to speak with your medical doctor as well as your naturopathic doctor when it comes to that.
So sometimes conventional methods work, other times the naturopathic route is more popular or more successful. How do you help patients decide which road to go down?
Well, I'm an integrative doctor, so I actually prefer utilizing both conventional and alternative medicine together. I like to utilize the research that exists out there supporting both uses at the same time. I think that sometimes it's important to look at the research when it comes to these therapies because there's a lot of benefit in both worlds.
Now, you like to use a lot of natural treatments when it comes to treating patients with cancer. Tell me about some of those options available.
Natural treatments. So there's oral supplementation treatments as well as injection treatments as well as IV, intravenous treatments. Oral treatments we can employ in a wide variety of cancers, but certain cancers we can't. For example, patients with esophageal cancer or digestive tract cancers, sometimes they won't be able to absorb or even digest the things that we want to give them. So we can employ injection therapies or IV intravenous therapies that tend to be slightly stronger and more efficacious anyway. And then that way it bypasses their entire digestive tract.
That's actually how my father died, was esophageal cancer. He had a huge tumor in his esophagus. He couldn't swallow food anymore and basically starved to death.
Oh,
they even brought in they even brought in a surgeon from Germany to install a metal stent to help open up his passageway so he could swallow food.
Yeah.
But the tumor was so powerful that it snapped the metal stent that was inside of him.
Yeah, we can also employ through intravenous methods nutrition as well. So beyond just cancer therapies, we can also help to support vitality in those patients too.
So how about antioxidants? Do they really help in the fight against cancer? And maybe when people also have cancer?
Yeah,
are they beneficial?
Antioxidants, there's huge pros to having antioxidants, but there's also contraindications to having antioxidants. So when someone's doing, say, for example, chemotherapy or radiation therapy, those are oxidative treatments. It's by and large contraindicated to use antioxidant therapies during that time. Antioxidants as a whole, by and large, are very supportive for treating cancer and helping cancer, but certain times you can't use them and they are contraindicated.
So what are some of the more powerful oral supplements that we can take?
So one of the best researched one is curcumin, which is turmeric. Now there's certain derivatives of it. One is called Meriva, the other is called Theracumin, another is called BCM95. They're typically better absorbed. They're actually some of the best absorbed turmerics out there or curcumins out there. That's actually one of my favorites just because of the base of research. There's a lot of other things. There's EGCG, there's indole-3-carbinol, there's grapeseed extract. There's many different oral supplements that we can apply to different types of cancers. You don't want to just go out and grab a bunch of supplements. It's best to talk to somebody who's professionally trained to give you those supplements in cancer and make sure that they're not contraindicated in your conventional therapies.
Some people are looking at going to Mexico for some of their treatments. Mm-hmm. What are the pros and cons of that, outside of the drug cartels and the gang violence that's taking place?
Right. Yeah, I have some concerns with my patients going down to Mexico. One is that the majority of the conventional therapies and alternative therapies that they're looking to get down there are quite easily accessible here anyway. Our regulations are very strict, and I'm confident in our regulations as both conventional and naturopathic doctors here. I've had a few cases that bring a little concern in terms of dosing when it comes to treatment down there. So I just really advise my patients to look into their options up here first and really look into the quality of therapy that they get down in Mexico.
Now, you talked a bit earlier about diet.
Yeah.
Now, are certain foods available that can help maybe slow down the cancer spreading within our body, or maybe a tumor growing within our body?
There's a lot of evidence and research on diet and cancer. I try not to overcomplicate it with my patients. By and large, you want to eat a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables. You want to decrease saturated and trans fats from your diet. But
it's a lot of fast foods.
Exactly.
Right?
Anything that's refined is really important to eliminate.
Refined sugars, right? So the
That's
pops,
right.
the sodas that are out there?
Yeah, so refined sugar, in general, we don't want to be afraid of sugar because it's a blanket term, right? There's a lot of sugar in fruit and sugar in vegetables, sugar in a lot of different things.
Well, the fruit drinks too that we give our kids a lot of times, right, for their lunches.
Yeah, but it's refined. Refined sugars is what we need to be careful of. And there's thousands of studies out there that will show that diets that are high in refined sugars or even high in saturated fats lead to an increased risk of cancer.
So does the tumor actually feed off of the refined sugar? How does that work within our bodies?
It's a little bit more complicated than that, but it can increase different tumor markers, and it leads to either more aggressive, potentially aggressive cancer, or it can lead to cancer. There's many carcinogens in food that we can eat. Even just burnt food is somewhat of a carcinogen. So we have to be careful when it comes to diet, but you can't be overly cautious of eating, especially when you have cancer, because food is life, and you have to make sure that you're eating when you have cancer because it is a metabolic disease.
And our body needs the fuel, right?
Your body needs the fuel
to fight that cancer.
Yeah. You're burning a lot more sugar. Your liver is burning, going through a lot more sugar when you have cancer. So a lot of times patients will become cahexic. Basically, their metabolism is on overdrive, and they have to eat. So a lot of patients, they have to have a high glycemic index diet in order to sustain their weight and make it through chemo or make it through radiation. And they shouldn't feel bad about that. But on the other hand, you want to be careful with it to a certain extent and not overdo it, because we know that the research says high sugar diets aren't necessarily good for you when you have cancer.
How about foods that could potentially prevent the risk of breast cancer?
Yeah, so there's actually a large study recently done in 2018, actually on a very simple diet that a lot of people are familiar with, called the Mediterranean diet. It's a diet high in...
I'm very familiar with it, lots of fish.
That's right, high in fish, high in fruit and vegetables, and it actually shows a reduction of breast cancer with that diet, a reduced risk of breast cancer with that diet. Food, especially with specific types of cancers, is very important.
Now, how about for men when it comes to prostate cancer?
Yeah.
What kinds of food should we avoid? And what do you encourage us to eat?
So definitely, again, avoiding, with both breast and prostate cancer, trying to avoid red meats, those that are high in saturated fats. Are really important. When it comes to prostate cancer specifically, there's actually research to indicate that certain specific phytochemicals in plants, so especially like green leafy vegetables and blueberries, they're full of antioxidants, and they can actually really help reduce your risk of prostate cancer.
I've heard as well with pomegranate juice and blueberries, high in antioxidants, which are good for men too, right?
Exactly, yes.
That's wonderful. How about when it comes to colon cancer? Any dietary recommendations or maybe restrictions?
Yeah, the difficulty with colon cancer is a lot of patients with colon cancer have difficulty digesting their nutrition. So it's recommended that you eat small, frequent meals throughout the day. Also,
when you say frequent, I know some people have 6 meals a day, small meals a day. Would you recommend we go that high, or
yes,
3 enough?
Absolutely. No,
really?
No, you want more than 3. You want, especially for patients with colon cancer, you want to be eating small, frequent meals throughout the day. So 6, 8. What you don't want to do is stress the digestive tract. You also want to try and have things that are liquid. So smoothies, for example. You can put different protein powders in there. Protein will slow the absorption of any sugar in the fruit or vegetables that you blend up. But it just makes it a lot easier for those patients to digest food and absorb nutrients.
Now, can you really explain how sugar and insulin levels really impact our cancer?
Well, sugar specifically.
We talked about the refined sugar earlier.
Yeah, I mean, countless studies show that sugar and that cancer is a metabolic disorder. To me, the research is very clear that sugar, especially refined sugar, will increase your risk of cancer. Definitely. In terms of insulin-like growth factor, it will increase specific tumor markers that will potentially make cancer more aggressive. Limiting the amount of refined sugar, to me, is a very beneficial thing to do when it comes to cancer treatment, pending your overall nutritional status is good, and you don't need extra caloric intake in those patients.
So, Dr. Cogano, let me ask you, how important is it to really maintain a healthy weight?
Yes, that again has been researched tremendously. The research pretty well proves, and I'm talking thousands and thousands of patient studies. Like, these are big populations of patients being researched, that there's a direct correlation between weight loss and increased survival rates in cancer. The higher the weight you are, the worse insulin resistance you have or metabolic disease you have. It's pretty clear you want to exercise and be healthy overall, as well as when you have cancer.
So maybe staying away from red meat and as well maybe the Mediterranean diet, some more fish
That's
oils
right.
in your diet.
Yeah.
What else outside of the fruits and vegetables would you recommend?
Well, there was a really good study a few years ago on breast cancer and exercise. And now exercise was defined in this study by walking 3 times a week. A brisk walk 3 times a week.
Like a half an hour walk?
Half an hour walk, brisk, you know, so not.
So the heart
not
rate
super
increases?
The study showed that patients, women, it was a study on women in breast cancer, women that had exercised and stopped exercising when they got diagnosed had a 50% increased risk of death.
Wow.
Those that started exercising that hadn't had a 50% increased survival rate. So what we know is that exercise is very beneficial in cancer. It in every way, shape, and form. Yeah.
Okay, the exercise, but again, the diet, the Mediterranean diet, we said. What other diets really work well? Stay away from the red meat, you said? More white meat, like chicken?
I try not to complicate it. If it runs on the earth, if it grows in a tree or grows in the ground, I say you can eat it. Otherwise, don't eat it. To me, it's one of those things that often gets overcomplicated. I have patients that are starving themselves for no reason at all, and that they become afraid of food. You shouldn't be afraid of food when you have cancer.
Well, that's a whole other issue. That's bulimia and maybe anorexia.
Well, yeah, and it's also just a big fear that if they have too much sugar, even in the form of fruit or vegetables, that it's going to feed their cancer to the point where it's going to make it worse and worse and worse. And that's not the point. The point is to limit the refined carbohydrates. So there's many different diets that can do that. Some people will go to extreme and go to a full ketogenic diet. I don't think it's fully necessary for patients to do that. I think if they eat a healthful diet overall, they'll be fine. As patients need good nutritional status to go through chemotherapy and radiation therapy and even recover from things like that or recover from surgery, they shouldn't be too worried about their diet. They have enough on their plate.
So we talked about diet and exercise. What about stress? How much does that really impact your health and potentially cause cancer?
Yeah, to the extent we don't fully know right now, but certainly stress can cause a lot of chemical changes in our body. Stress has been linked to different cancers, absolutely. It can cause physiological changes like gastroesophageal reflux disorder, which will increase your risk over time of esophageal cancer. It creates digestive tract issues, so shuts off your digestive tract, and can be potentially detrimental to patients. So I think that stress, as in general, is a very common thing in our society today. And it needs to be managed better, and certainly can be linked to different cancers.
Dr. Clayton Cogano, naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Meridian Integrated Health and Wellness Center. Thanks so much for joining me here today on Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, eat well, and have a great night.